forward. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Audrey Friedrichsen. I am the Land Use and Environmental Advocacy Attorney at Scenic Hudson.
Melissa.
Melissa Everett. Oh, sorry.
Okay, Melissa Everett and then Melissa Iacchetta.
Great, thanks. So I'm Executive Director of Sustainable Hudson Valley and very interested in this stuff as it connects to the Regional Climate Action Strategy a bunch of us have been working on. And at some point want to mention super briefly that we have helped Marbletown do 100% renewable action strategy that builds on this kind of site assessment and some other pieces. And we would love to work with anybody that Matt and Audrey haven't completely burned out. I'm kidding. Anybody who has juice from this, which I expect you would, talk to me about how to build on it. And I may be on and off because I'm driving, but thank you very much.
Okay, Chris.
Chris Kehoe. I'm the town planner in the town of Cortland in Westchester County. We've adopted a model solar ordinance and have actually reviewed 3 solar applications, have approved 1. And the way the process starts in our town is they have to start with the town board to get released to the planning board. And the town board stopped 2 applications with them due to siting concerns. So the planning board has reviewed 3, approved 1, and is struggling with the other 2 due to environmental issues such as trees, steep slopes, and wetlands.
Thank you. Victoria, followed by Alan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Caffarelli from the Town Supervisor's Office in the town of Ossining, also in Westchester County. We also do have a solar ordinance. We had 1 project go forward, 1 project did not go forward. And it's just been interesting to hear what's going on elsewhere and how to apply it in our town. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Alan.
Alan Newman with the Marbletown ECC. And I can confirm that Melissa has been, and this Sustainable Hudson Valley have been a great partner for our efforts and has helped us a lot with getting laws passed and huge initiatives within Marbletown. And I highly recommend working with her.
Great. Andrew, followed by Daniel.
Hello, Melissa, and good to see many of you back again. I'm Andrew Faust, founding member of the Rondout Creek Watershed Alliance and Permaculture Living Lands Trust. Big advocate of planning and thinking about watershed scale master planning with food and energy independence in mind.
Great. Daniel, followed by Alex.
And hi, I'm Dan White. I'm the co-chair of the Town of Olive Conservation Advisory Council. This year we completed our natural resources inventory, are starting an open space inventory. We haven't had any applications from solar vendors yet. And the town is beginning to work, probably the only town in the Hudson Valley that doesn't have a comprehensive plan. And we're working with the town board to put together a comprehensive plan. And they all overlap. Also, I'm going to be asking if anybody who's done an open space inventory, if you're willing to share your experience with me, that's pretty high on our priority list. So, if you could open to a 15-minute phone call, that would be wonderful.
And maybe they could put their email in the chat and say that they're interested, and then you'll know to follow up. Alex, followed by Penny.
Hi, everybody. Alex Wolf, conservation scientist with Scenic Hudson.
Penny.
Penny Coleman, anxious citizen of the world, and what?
As long as it's made by Pfizer, and, Biden's get money.
Am I not muted?
Oh, you're good. I muted him.
Okay. I'm Penny Coleman, and I'm an anxious citizen. I want to get this done soon, and I'm Mena's foot soldier. Men, are you talking? You're muted.
Yeah, you're-
Whoever's talking, everybody's
Yeah,
muted.
no, everyone's muted. Hi, I didn't go yet. I'm Melissa Ayacheta, the less known Melissa. And I am helping co-host this cohort. I am on the Climate Smart Kingston Commission and new to New Yorkers for Clean Power as the program manager. And I'm representing the city of Kingston in this. Did anybody
Yeah.
not go yet?
Yeah, Penny and then Spencer, oh, Penny, yeah, Penny, then Spencer, then Carol.
Penny just went.
Okay, Spencer and then Carol.
I'm Spencer Slow from the town of Olive. I work with Dan White on the Conservation Advisory Council for the town, and I'm here to learn more. And this has been great so far.
Thank you. Let's see. Jan, followed by Katie, followed by Jim Creighton.
Hey, I'm Jan. I'm doing the Warsing, and I'm in the Warsing ECC, and yeah.
Great. Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie Crawford. I work for the City of White Plains and I'm a planner. Currently, we're working on our comprehensive plan, which we're hoping to include a lot of solar into. So this has been really helpful and I really appreciate all of the information and putting this all together.
And James? Jim? You're on mute now. He may have had to step away. Sounded like there was stuff going on in the background. Carol, did you go?
No, sorry, I'm late. I'm Carol Richmond from Gardner. I was on the ECC for I think 6 years, maybe more. And then I moved to the planning board for almost 7 years. And I'm about to start on the town board in January. And
wow, congratulations.
You won your election?
yeah, it wasn't that hard. But this is awesome. And I think our laws need to be revised based on this. And I'm very excited about it.
Excellent. And did Jim, are you able to unmute? If not, we'll catch you later.
I am. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So I'm Jim Creighton. I'm one of the town councilmen up in the town of Cortland. And on January 1st, I was reelected and will be the deputy supervisor. So that'll be fun. But we've been working on we have a moratoria in effect now and are working on an amendment to our solar code. So looking forward to tying all the knots together and working on, all the great things we learned here and hopefully, making a further difference on our move toward mitigating the climate change effects.
So urgent. So thank you. And
Thank you.
We should remind people to stay on mute except when you are talking and put your hand up or use the little icon or whatever. And we have a very packed agenda. So let's see. I think the next thing, Melissa, I didn't make a column for today on the spreadsheet.
I did it. I gotcha. Attendance is taken.
All right.
Check.
And we are recording. So the first section is, what questions or comments does anyone have for the work that they've done between the last time we met on December 2nd and now? Anything come up that you're like, well, I didn't expect this, or this was really confusing, or this was really inspiring, any of that you would like to comment on before we really review and go through this very full agenda.
And I would just add to that before we open it up, we're gonna plan on actually going over the tool. Like we have a little show and tell section that I'm gonna present at, Mana's gonna present at. So if it's questions about the functionality of the tool, how do I measure, how do I draw, things like that, we can save those questions for then. But this is just your overall questions and comments from last time.
I will just mention, we just had Peter join us as well. We did everybody else. And also there's not negative points because we do recognize it is a crazy time of the year in the holiday season. So if you didn't get a chance to do anything between then and now, we won't dock you any points.
And I want to welcome Peter Capek, who's a Clearwater board member. And Peter, are you actually sort of using the town of Yorktown as a an example to work through
I'd
this?
like to. I haven't gotten much traction. I haven't really found the right person yet, I think.
Okay.
The right contact, but I'm working on it.
Great. All right. Very good. Melissa, do you want to take us through the agenda?
Yeah, I can. Andrew, I see your hand raised. Do you want to?
Oh, good.
Give some feedback. Oh, you're muted.
I looked over the solar zoning law documents and those that you sent, Mana. Thank you. And, you know, my question is kind of along the lines that it has been, which is, what's the incentive for these municipalities to adopt these? Because, and then my second one is still from the last time lingering for me, honestly, which is energy budgeting with a view towards what the point of various kilowatt levels of energy is in regards to local consumption. You know, are we talking about arrays that are meant to feed into a centralized grid where we end up with huge solar farms upstate, you know, to power New York City? Or are we talking about solar arrays that are actually decentralized, appropriate scaled with an energy budget of what the present use pattern is? I think these are important questions to think about as far as how do we, as planners or as environmental or conservation advocates, really honestly and ethically say to our communities that this is a good idea. And I think food is getting left out of the mix. I like this, you know, pattern, honestly, of saying ag districts aren't where solar belongs because potatoes belong there. And I don't think growing lettuce or grazing a few sheep between the panels really is a substantive example of food production, especially on Unadilla silt loam. You know, I see these things disregarded right here in town of Wawarsing, and it really concerns me. I feel like I understand why people feel that this is a crisis, and the response to climate is that we need to roll out solar as quickly as possible and on as large a scale as possible. And I understand that this solar planning tool offers a level of precision and surgery to how it could happen that's really positive. My concern is whether that planning tool really is going to get made use of. You know, are we going to max out brownfields, parking lots, Superfund sites, degraded areas, or are we going to see solar arrays going up on prime agricultural soils?
Andrew, I think you're going to see a couple of examples. I know we did some extensive use of the tool in Rosendale, and none of it was on farmland. And so I think the tool is designed to steer people away, but there may be instances where you can save a farm by using marginal land or rocky outcrop or whatever.
There, I'm on board with that.
Could you just repeat your first question? And I think we'll be able to answer your second question a little bit later in the agenda.
My first question is simply about like an energy budget from an analysis viewpoint. Can we start to generate data around what is the load right now of demand in a given community? And is a particular community array of panels going to actually be able to feed that load? And then how do we begin to incentivize, obviously, cutting down on demand simultaneously with creating infrastructure that is more resilient, decentralized, and not dependent on what, my understanding is, and I mentioned this last time, Independent System Operators Manual says 4,000 miles of the 11,000 miles in the Northeastern Corridor is going to need to be replaced to the tune of $25 billion in the next 25 years. And they don't advocate continuing to maintain the centralized grid. They're saying we need to create distributed grid. And I know we've been talking about that in here. So I'm excited about how those ideas can all dovetail for us in the Hudson Valley to really come up with a regional infrastructure that's in the right place at the right scale. And as we're all advocating here, I don't mean to imply at all that this community and the discussion here in this planning framework aren't considering these things. So those are my questions and things that I'm inspired to collectively put together a good articulate vision for this region that makes good design sense and have some parameters that we're fitting it into that are appropriate.
Let me say that there is, as part of the Hudson Valley Regional Sustainability Coalition and Energy Working Group, that is absolutely deeply working on all of those. Alex, a little later in the agenda, is going to touch on some research he's done, and we're all going to collectively continue to research how we can determine the load and try to achieve 70% by 2030, at least have that a goal so municipalities become proactive in wise solar siting, and that includes your concerns. There's a lot more to it, but let's see how much of this gets answered during the session, and then we can come back to it at the end.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that does kind of segue into what we wanted Alex to just briefly touch upon. So if you just want to share.
Yeah, but unfortunately, my update is a bit of a non-update. I think we mentioned last time, Anna had turned up some great leads, and we are still looking into sort of what those leads are, and basically we want to make sure that we're not that we're understanding the numbers correctly, because I think Andrew is raising a lot of really important questions about the grid, the bigger picture of the grid, and sort of what its future should be and what we should be trying to target. Although, to some extent, the state is doing top-down targets for a lot of this stuff. But, basically, we're still working on it. And Andrew, you're not the only one wondering about community loads and looking for those numbers. So we're gonna keep digging on it and share, hopefully, when we have something to share.
Yeah, and I think, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of stress this, and we're going to say this a few times during this last meeting, that this is not the last meeting. It is the last meeting, but, we can keep in contact with that shared drive. We all have each other's contact info. We can keep a thread going as we find out more information. And, we did keep your question as a follow-up, but we were not able to address it fully. And we want to wait until we have all the info. Go ahead, Manna.
Well, just knowledge is power. And I think that if municipalities use this tool and participate in the planning, the regional planning discussion, we are identifying as many of the obstacles and trying to promote incentives that are going to work. We are in a crisis, but we only have one chance to do it right. And That's what this conversation and this tool is promoting. So Melissa, if you can follow the agenda, I have
Yeah.
it pulled up. Go ahead.
Dan, I see your hand raised if you want to ask, or, oh, you're muted.
Regarding upgrading the grid, which seems to be one of the limiting factors besides political will and consciousness raising, who would do that? And I noticed Governor Hochul, announced, an increased expectation for, decentralized grid, but, does Central Hudson do that? Does the state force them to do it? Do towns or counties get involved? So, let's assume we're going to go toward, Andrew's ideal of a, completely decentralized grid. Who would build it and maintain it and approve it and pay for it?
I can give an update on that. I don't know if we're jumping ahead on the agenda to do that. And I think that Manna did did you send around to this group, Manna, the Central Hudson slides and the recording?
I think I did, but I can again.
So with all her foresight that she usually has, Manna has been one of the ones raising this question of load and, the issue of interconnection and the role of the utilities. So one of the things to keep in mind is that the 70 by 30 and the 70 by 30 renewable energy and the 100 by 40 zero emissions energy grid system is actually an obligation placed on the load serving entities, right? That's our utilities. And they are supposed to demonstrate their increasing meeting of that 70 by 30 goal by putting renewable energy on their systems, right? So that's who it is that has the obligation. And another obligation that was put on the utilities as well as the ISO, right? The independent service operator who manages the grid in the state, is to do a grid study, to do just what you said, Dan. And they're supposed to look at the system at all levels, at what they call distribution, right? We learned from Manna what distribution is, and at what they call local distribution, which is a little bit larger voltage, and then at the transmission level, right, which is the high voltage long distance transmission. And so there is currently a grid study going on at the state level. And coming out of that are obligations again being placed on the utilities. So last week, was it last week or even the week before, Manna solicited and was able to get made to a group of folks that are working under the Regional Climate Action Strategy and the Renewable Energy Implementation Plan thinking that Manna just described, a presentation made by Central Hudson and the people within Central Hudson who are doing this distributed system integration planning, right? They are the ones tasked with trying to figure out how we take a system that was built on very large generation and long distance transmission and convert it to one that can handle energy going in two directions, as well as intermittent sources, things like storage, which result in both generation and load, right? Because when a battery is charging, it's drawing load, right? So they need to deal with that and make sure that the power quality and the power reliability isn't impacted by that switch. So when a distributed energy resource wants to connect, there are three kinds of interconnection processes, and they're based on the size of a project, where it's located, and whether it's participating in the retail or the wholesale market. So within those three interconnection queues, there are a whole lot of projects within the Central Hudson territory right now. So they really are being challenged and stretched by this integration of distributed energy resources. Because the grid simply wasn't built to handle that. So as Andrew points out, right, we need to plan for this, right? So there is a grid study that is happening, and every time something wants to connect, they have to do this interconnection study and make sure that something can be interconnected without impacting or needing upgrades, right? And so if you're a developer of a solar project who's trying to keep your costs down, this is where the hosting capacity maps that we have pulled into the map come into play, because a developer is going to look where there is existing capacity that can interconnect without having to pay for upgrades, right? And then, so now we know we need upgrades to deal with all of this new distributed intermittent generation. And so Dan, you raised the exact right question, which is who is going to do it and who is going to pay for it. So that's what is currently being proposed and vetted before the Public Service Commission are those two things. You know, what do we need to do in terms of upgrades? And they've made a proposal for cost sharing, right? And it's gonna be amongst the developers in the queue, the utilities who own the system, and the ratepayers, right? We're gonna have to distribute the costs amongst everybody. And that has not yet been determined. That's currently, actually, I just saw last week that a public comment period on the cost sharing proposal is before the Public Service Commission. So if anybody really wants to get wonky and in the weeds, you can go ahead and read all that stuff and submit your public comments. So, you know, and that's just one of the utilities, that's Central Hudson. You know, as I think one of the times that we looked at the solar mapping tool that Alex brought it up, I think he showed the map of the utility areas. And so Central Hudson does cover the majority of our Hudson Valley region, but what's called the joint utilities is all 5 of them together, Con Ed and NYSEG and Orange and Rockland and Central Hudson all together. Those utilities who provide the service in New York are the ones who are tasked with figuring this out. So, you know, and so, you know, Andrew, going back to your question, you know, we are all sort of not necessarily trapped, but we are in a circumstance where, you know, the state has issued these policies. We've got grid studies, we've got build ready programs, we've got an agricultural technical working group who is figuring out a scorecard on how to make sure that projects either stay out of those soils or provide mitigation in the form of, you know, real meaningful agrovoltaics and co-location. So all of these things are happening, but those of us here in this group, right, we are on the ground, right, where the shovel literally goes in the ground, trying to think about how to do the planning. So, you know, understanding all of those pieces and thinking about them and that planning is super important and what we need to keep in mind. But, you know, as Manna said, we're sort of one piece in the puzzle, and I really appreciate how much everybody here is really thinking about that and how you can do it at your level. So hopefully, Daniel, that answered your question and sort of lets you know what the utilities are doing. You know, they're doing it a little bit kicking and screaming, but they're meeting their obligations under what they're being told to do under statute and by the Public Service Commission.
Yeah. So one slightly harder
That was
question.
great, thank you.
What's your best guess on the timetable when the grid will be 2/3 upgraded and decentralized?
You mean actual, well, I mean, by 2030 is when we need 70% renewable energy. So they've got a short timetable. I haven't been able to spend as much time with that as I really would like to, and just, you know, read everybody's distributed system integration plan and see what those timetables are. But, you know, they should be coming soon, I think.
Melissa, Everett, for just 1 second, I think there's another piece of it that complicates factors is the big transmission.
Can't hear you, Melissa.
Sorry, the big transmission lines, I think, have been, contracts were recently signed with NYSERDA and a couple of utilities developers to do the big transmission lines. And I think that's, you know, like a 3 to 5 year just infrastructure project. So it would be lovely if all these things happened in the time frame that we need them to. But I think for all of us to be vigilant is really important. And then the other quick thing, I would say in the last 2 or 3 years, as we've been interacting with the utilities, Central Hudson has always been the most responsive, but I've seen a real shift from their kicking and screaming and charging and, you know, delaying tactics to they get it. And the kind of inputs from groups like this is a lot of why they're taking it seriously, I think.
Yeah,
Penny?
I think that's right. So what Melissa was referring to in terms of large transmission projects, so in addition to what we have existing in our New York State grid, in order to achieve the elimination of what they call peaker plants down in the New York City area, which are highly polluting and located in environmental justice areas and only run at certain times of the day or year when that extra energy is needed, they have they solicited proposals, NYSERDA solicited proposals from developers to bring cleaner energy from upstate into the New York City region. And as Melissa mentioned, 2 proposals were selected and awarded contracts. Those contracts now need to be approved by the Public Service Commission. There is yet another public comment period currently open on that. And one of the projects is the previously cited and certified Central Hudson Power Express, which will bring hydropower from Quebec down, running a line to
Champlain Hudson.
Champlain Hudson, yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And the other one is called Clean Path New York, and that starts sort of in the middle of the state and is meant to collect energy from mostly as of yet unbuilt large-scale solar and wind, and then bring that also down into New York City. And that project, in addition to having its contract approved, needs to go through a siting approval process as well. So yeah, yet another piece in the puzzle. But yeah, Melissa, I mean, the sheer fact that Central Hudson came and was very willing and open and made that presentation to the group last week is a sign that they're getting the picture and they need to be on board.
Penny?
Yeah, I understand that the carrot here is survival, but where's the stick? What happens to the utilities if they drag their feet? Who enforces this? Is it just the Public Service Commission?
Primarily.
Yeah.
And they know it's the law. They may be kicking and screaming, but they're really trying to figure it out. And I think if you watch the Central Hudson presentation, if I can find it easily, I'll put it in the chat, but I'll definitely send it around. And they included their slides, and it still raised, there were a lot of unanswered questions, but it was focused on grid upgrades and interconnection, and helping us to understand their role. And then we have our role, the developers have their role, consumers, etc. But I think are you okay if we move on, or do you still have another question?
No, I just don't trust them. So it's,
I think.
Okay, I'm okay. We can put pressure on them. I understand that.
Yeah, between the watchdogs and the Public Service Commission and the law, and God bless all the people that put the Climate Act into place.
Yeah,
we now have God on our side, as it were. So Melissa, where are we?
Yes. All right. So if we're done with the questions for now, we're going to move on to just some sharing and showcasing. So I'm actually going to go over some stuff from Kingston. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Not yet. Yes.
Okay. So I did not want to share the agenda, so I just all right, I got to make sure I don't do that. Give me one sec. Okay, so I just wanted to give some general tips. Some people did contact me over the weekend with questions. They were trying to do it on their own, and you know, I think if you don't have a mapping background, some of the stuff isn't as intuitive. So I just wanted to share my experience, some things I did to help me. One of the things we really talked about was you can't really save with this map. It's meant for making PDFs for kind of a stagnant, you know, 2D version. It's not an interactive map. You, the end use is not really interactive. You can interact with it as you build your map. And so I kind of did some things to help me out with that. You know, if perhaps things lag or your map crashes and you need to start over, I basically I had my part 3 going through the different layers up in one screen, and then I had Google Maps in another screen. And so I was kind of looking at those side by side. What I actually did is just search Kingston. And if you search your municipality you're working with, it will outline it in Google. So then you can kind of use the solar mapping tool and Google at the same time. Google has certain features that do not come with the base map that was in the tool. So as you're going through the layers and you want to mark stuff, what you can actually do, I know this is not a place, but if you right click and just you see the XY coordinate, you can just copy that, and that's copied to your clipboard. So then you can go into your worksheet and paste your coordinates. So that's what I did, and my sheet is in my Kingston folder. So if anybody wanted to go in there and see, I have XY locations of possible sites, any buildings with good, you know, giant area acreage. I basically just copied the XY coordinate for us. So then in the future, I can go back to those places without having to remember that. I also took addresses. You know, Google has actually updated its whole system, so the roofs have the numbers on them, so that you know what's what. And then another feature is things are marked. So I was looking at this area up here with sorry, my mouse is not being as responsive, and I wanted to know what this was, and if I click it, it's a manufacturing plant. So you can use Google Map while you're using the solar mapping tool to kind of help you fill out your worksheet. And we wanted to stress this whole time that the worksheet is really helpful in breaking everything down. So then when you're in part 4, it's not as overwhelming when all the layers are there, because you've already kind of done the work and scoped out some areas. So that is, you know, just regular Google use. There's options for, you know, when you first go in, you're going to see just the this base map layer, but if you turn on the satellite, you'll get the same thing as the tool. And so that will help you fill out your sheet. I think Matt is going to touch it. Does someone have a question?
Sorry, Melissa, this is Alex. I was just going to add a couple. This is super helpful.
Yeah.
And if you go back to Google Maps, another thing that I use sometimes is Street View. So like you were saying, you know, you see an industrial building, you don't know what it is. Street View can also be really helpful in assessing, trying to figure out what something is, and seeing, you know, is the lot vacant, is the building abandoned, stuff like that. And
so
Melissa's, go ahead.
There's this little guy here. He's a little man on the right bottom. You can just pull him and drop him. Anywhere that's blue will zoom you into the street. And that's where you can also check out your distribution lines as well as with the map tool. I actually did work with Central Hudson in their mapping department. So I'm very familiar with the lines. And if anybody needs help looking at, you know, what's a 3-phase line, what's a single phase line, would the, you know, would solar work here, I can definitely help out. You know, for example, this side of the road is a single phase line, but this opposite side is secondary. So there's actually no primary running on that right side of the street. So there are differences when you look up there, and I can definitely help people figure that out.
Can I also just quickly point out, if you go to part 4, in the mapping tool, there is a way to get the coordinates out towards the bottom of the screen there. You may have to
Yeah, I'm trying to like share my
maximize.
screen, but
Gotcha. Well, never
yeah.
mind. There's a little coordinate tool in the bottom left of part 4, and you can actually drop a pin and copy and paste coordinates out of there too. So thanks and sorry for interrupting.
That's okay. So that is Google XY coordinates, marking stuff for later, base map changes. That's base map changes in Street View. I also wanted to show you within the tool, there is a base map gallery, and you can play around with that, especially when you're making your map, because I have the maps I made. They're very rough. I honestly didn't finish, and I could have spent more time on this. But I used just the terrain background for one of my maps. And then, oh man, my mouse is really freezing. I used the satellite imagery for my other map. And there's, options to turn off labels. I decided to add the acreage to my my little polygons that I made to trace with. So that it's a nice overview. That's optional. There's options to add text. So I think Audrey may go over some of that stuff in a bit also. So I don't want to repeat that, but that's all there.
Melissa, do you want to go over how you made the polygons, the draw and the measure tool, and also the PDF tool or screenshots?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Hold on. Let's give my mouse a second. All right. I've had this loaded all day. So here, actually, let's go up here. So it's funny, when I was first zooming around, in one of the first layers of the part 3, you don't have the satellite imagery. So I was identifying this place. And then when I actually got to part 4, there's actually already solar here, which is funny. But let's say I wanted to identify this site as a solar site. I would go, okay.
I believe that's Point of Praise Church, right?
Yes, it is. Yep. Okay, hold on. My mouse is really giving me issues right now. I wonder if there we go. Okay, so there is a draw tool. And then you basically have options of what you want to do. So I kind of did 2. I did a polygon feature and I did a point feature together because I wanted a pretty little sun icon on top of my my sites. So first you select and you have the option to change the colors, play around with an outline. I had it yellow, and then I realized I wanted a thick border to make it really stand out, especially if you have your building like footprint layer on. I forgot what it's called. That's also yellow. So depending on what you have turned on, you may want to play around with your coloring scheme. And then you can also set your transparency. So how clear is it? How solid does it look? Do you want to be able to see certain things underneath it? If it's a parking lot, you may want to make it more transparent to know that's not a building, that's a parking lot you want to do solar canopy stuff with. Okay, so then when you actually want to draw, so let's say I want it to be yellow, you actually have to start clicking your map. My mouse is really, it's like the one thing I can contribute here, it's not letting me. Okay, so you start to draw and you actually click where you want. Let's say I want to avoid the already put in solar. I can just be clicking around to the shape of this land. And then you want to double click when you're done. And I actually set this to say show area measurement. So if I turn that off and then I drew, it would just be the polygon shape. So actually, let me just draw over here. Now I have just the shape without that layer there or label. I did notice there's no delete option. Like if I, drew something I didn't want there, which is a little unfortunate because I made a funky shape once and I just restarted the whole thing. But again, if I have my XY coordinates and I have a list of things, that I know to go back to, it just makes it easier. And then there's the measure. Yep. Go ahead.
There is the undo and the clear buttons at the bottom there.
Yeah.
So those
and they work.
Yes, but does it work? Like if I added one, can I then Like it just
Yeah.
undoes the last one.
It undoes the last one and
Yeah.
it doesn't clear
So
everything.
like if I figured out, hey, like this one doesn't work with one of the other layers, like I turned on, you know, it, yeah. But yeah, there's an undo right here that will undo the last one. And it to clear all of your polygons. Okay, so that's the draw. And then you also have a measure tool. So I'm going to close that. And it's the little ruler. I probably should not have cleared my polygon because you can measure your polygon. But let's say my polygon was here. I can do this. And this piece of land is 3.93 acres. And there's also a little units tool here. If you drop down, you can change it. I think when you come in, it's not on acres, but I don't remember. I might have set it because I've had this tool up all day, which may be why my mouse is not responding, but
it's on acres.
Yeah.
It's on acres.
All right. Are there any questions about some of the tools in the map that we went over?
Melissa, why would you use the measuring tool if you can just use the, when you're using the drawing tool, just put it?
Well, let's say you want to just measure an entire field. You can click it. Let's say this field, I just want to know quickly what it is. Oh, hello. Oh, no, sorry. I clicked the wrong one. Wow, this is going like microscopically slow.
Right, I think the idea is if you just want to know the acreage of some area without actually drawing the polygon.
Yeah. See that middle tool there just draws a line so that I can know that without having to sit there and click and kind of map a whole shape out. If you're looking for solar over a certain size, you may want to do that before you even start drawing a polygon to just get a quick idea.
Yeah, I'll also point out that that middle one is distance, which is sometimes relevant if you're thinking about like the distance you are from a transmission line, because it's very expensive to bridge from a solar project to a transmission line for the larger projects. So we know that, you know, beyond say a quarter mile of a transmission line, it's very unlikely right now with the market like it is that there's going to be a large scale solar project. So that middle ruler tool does distances instead of areas, which can be quite useful.
Yeah, that's a
also
great
thinking
point.
about, you know, a certain distance from wetland or a forest core or something like that.
Yeah. And then just to point out one of the other ones, I actually added a point. I added a sun on top of my polygon shapes. You can pick any color. If you initially just want to start mapping or, you know, dropping points and then go back later and decide with all the layers, you know, that may be an easier thing than sitting there and tracing a whole kind of thing. But again, you can't really delete specific things. You can only undo your last thing. So you would just want to start over in that scenario. Okay. So that is the tools and some tips from me. And then I think Mana's going to talk about snipping, so I'll save that for her. Let's see. And then I just wanted
Melissa?
Yeah.
How did you mark the location of that? How would you mark the location of that field?
So there is a draw tool, and then you can click what you want to, how you want to signify. You can drop a point, you can draw a polygon, which will outline the whole area. You know, put a pinpoint. So I had chosen polygon, and then I drew a polygon on the whole area. So every point you basically click with your mouse. That didn't happen. And I have noticed, depending on your lag, like sometimes it doesn't work. And you got to do it again. Let's do this again.
Then, Alan, what you need to do is, you know, whether you've sort of found places and dropped points or drawn polygons, as we pointed out at the beginning of the meeting, the mapper does not give you the ability to sort of save your place and then have your interactive map continue to live out there in the internet. What you need to do instead is either, save it as a PDF and then you can have it as a 2D version and print it out. The thing that I used, and I'll talk about this in a minute, is I use screenshots. So if you're not familiar with that, whether you have a Mac or a PC, you should have the ability to click a couple of buttons and your computer will basically just take a photograph of what's on your screen at the time, and then that gets saved as a photo. It'll usually show up in a screenshots folder in your photos folder.
Yeah, and we can go over the printing quick. I wanted to do one more thing before I did that. So did that answer your question about the drawing aspect?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I actually want to go over one more thing I noticed. So we have our tax parcel layer. And I wanted to know a certain land, who it was owned by. Is it city-owned land? Is it a private, person? And I had identified a huge area that I was just curious about, and I marked it. And my maps, they're not, this is where I think solar should be. This is me just playing around with the tool, kind of getting comfortable with making the polygons. And then it's more of an investigative, what do I do from here? Who would I contact? Is this land really available? But I found this area that is on the same tax parcel. So my tax parcel is labeled in yellow. And so this entire layer is one tax parcel. So all these houses are a tax parcel. So I wanted to know who owned this tax parcel. And if you look at the tool, it gives you the print key and the SBL, but doesn't give you the owner. And this is just working from GIS a lot, and specifically with Central Hudson and customers. You can actually go to a county tax parcel website, put in the info that you find here through the tool, and get that info. So then if you wanted to give a developer somebody's name, or suggest a certain property, who owns it. So what I actually did was I did a little Nancy Drew investigation, but I went to the tax parcel. If you just type in like Ulster County tax parcel map, Orange County tax parcel map, Dutchess County tax parcel map, it will come up. And then I used, you can search by address, SBL, whatever you want to get your tax parcel. And then here there's actually an identify tool. And my Zoom is in the way, but it will actually give you the owner information. So the owner is Amos R. Nooncombe. There's a second owner listed here, but it gives you the mailing address. Sometimes if, especially developers in the city own a lot of land up here, where to send kind of a contact, to them. So I just wanted to mention that that's the thing too. And all right, so let's just go over printing. All right, so really moving stuff around here to get it all to fit. Okay, so let's say I'm done with my map. I'm ready to go over this area with somebody else. I have the appropriate layers turned on, because remember, you can turn on and off the layers you want. I'm going to take the yellow tax parcels off. They're distracting. I want to present this to the zoning board or whomever. You get it how you want it, and then there's a print option. So you can print, and I actually, in my comments, which we're going to talk about later, that we have a comment form about this whole workshop and how it was, I might add that I think there should be a printing guide. I'm trying to remember like my intro to ARC printing days, because there are so many options, portrait versus landscape, kind of which one do you choose? I was playing around with how each looked. You can see how like many versions got created. But I think it just comes in as saving as a PDF, but then you can hit advanced. And so I was playing around with map scale versus map extent. Map extent kind of printed this giant zoomed out thing that looked really not right. And maybe Alex can tell me like which, if I picked the right ones. But I also played around with the DPI at the bottom. So I do think that a printing guide might be helpful to kind of go through all these advanced options. But when you're ready to save your PDF, you just hit print and it creates one for you. Sometimes it takes a second. And then when it's done, you can open it. It will open in a new browser, but then you can actually hit download and download it to your computer. So that's the map I just made of this area. And it has my scale at the bottom. It has the date, it has the time, and just, I had renamed mine. Don't remember where I did that.
Right at the top there, map title.
I did, okay, yeah, duh. Okay, so this is my initial Kingston Solar Opportunities overview. So that's kind of the map I made, was my this one here, the overview. Now you can then create one with the floodplains, one with the agricultural soils, to kind of overlap the different layers and create multiple side-by-side images that you then can bring with you to a planning meeting, or however you want to use it. You can play around with, you know, 2 layers at once, or however you want to do it, the scales. If I just wanted to focus on that one tax parcel property, you know, just doing that. All right, I mean, are there any questions about what I went over before I pass the torch to the sharing?
I've got a quick point, Melissa, if you wouldn't mind going back to your part 4 there. And I just want to point out, if you wouldn't mind clicking on that tools and functions quick help on the left-hand side of the screen there. Thank you. So this quick help is there to point out where all these tools are. And you'll notice, if Melissa hits back, that they're in different places. And that's because they change as you resize your window. So I just want to point that out for folks. And then also there is, under the tools and functions, labeled a little icon that says full screen in the upper, full screen mode in the upper right. And that can be helpful too. It'll basically get rid of all the white space from the part 4 instruction. And it's not there, Melissa, unless
I know it's there.
Screen.
Yeah.
But that can be nice too if you want to get rid of, sort of maximize your screen use.
Yeah, so that kind of is my entire screen is the map. Yeah. For some reason, when I did shrink it, it popped away. Yep.
Have you had this open? Because the one thing that I pointed out, or I discovered and asked about between sessions, the polygons and labels and everything, other than creating a PDF, if you close the tool and reopen it, you have to redo that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I kept my map up all day. I made it on my lunch break. And I was actually afraid if I like didn't have it loaded for a while, it would try to reload. So like every couple of minutes, I would like click the browser just in case. But yeah, but that's also why, you know, I tried to share the tip of like marking down in your worksheet the key areas and the key places. You know, I have a list here: YMCA, DEP building, Health Alliance, hospital, and then also the XY coordinates, so that if you do need to make it again, or for a different use, or with different layers turned on, you have your main places you are identifying already recorded. And then, you know, just for an example, I can take this here and then go to Google, and then go to my right here and just paste that coordinate, and it brings me right to where I had marked. So, you know, and then I can compare it to the tool. And that's what I was basically doing, is just comparing side by side the layout. And there is actually a search function in part 3, which is nice, where you can paste coordinates. Part 4 doesn't have it, but the more you do part 3, I feel the more familiar you become with your area in aerial view. And so it's easier when you're going back to it. Okay, I'll stop talking now. All right, so let's go back to our agenda. I'll stop sharing my screen. Were there questions in the chat or no? Okay, we're good. Screen, where did that agenda go? I minimized it. Okay, next I believe we're gonna have Audrey share some tools or some tips for the tool, and with a project she actually recently was working on.
Sure. So this is going to be an example. So as opposed to sort of mining, no pun intended, for potential sites to include in a comprehensive plan or consider while updating or adopting zoning, I can show an example of actually using the tool to look at a particular proposed project and the place where it is sited, and then the natural resources that are on that site, and figure out and start to assess what the impacts of that project will be. So I will share screen. And so what you're seeing on the screen here is a proposed project located in the town of Copake in Columbia County. The project is called Shepherd's Run. The developer is Hecate Energy, and it's a very large project. It's a 60 megawatt project. I don't know if we can see where the scale is here, if we can, if you can see it. So what I did is, and the reason why I asked Melissa to go over the draw and the measure tools is, so we are working with a group of folks to try and take a look at this project, and in the interest of making sure that it is designed as well as it can be, you know, assess its potential impacts, and then potentially make some recommendations to the developer to maybe move it around or locate it differently, and find ways that we can mitigate its impact and make sure we can get it, you know, sort of better sited in the landscape and reduce some of the community concerns that comes from siting a project like this. So this, again, as I mentioned, this is in the town of Copake. It's near Craryville, if you're familiar with Columbia County. So it is north and south of State Route 23 here. County Route 7 runs down. And so there are some concerns here over the fact that this is an agricultural area. What, you know, the impacts on the view shed might be from the place, you know, where the place it is. And then, as you can see, there's a pretty extensive set of wetlands in the area that the applicant says that they're trying to stay out of. So they've selected this place and they've got to kind of triage, right? You know, how they can do this layout and try and satisfy the community and still meet their obligations under their contract with NYSERDA to create a 60 megawatt project that they can sell renewable energy credits for. So what we were handed or given is an electronic version of this PDF of the project. The key over here tells us that the panel array areas are these gray areas. The pink is the collection lines. The green is where they're going to be proposing landscaping to try and mitigate visual impacts. And you can see how they're, you know, they've sited the panels in and around the wetlands. So, you know, this is all information coming from the developer. So how is it that we can sort of vet this in the absence of being handed the actual GIS shape files and then me being able to hand them over to Alex and then him being able to look at them on Esri separately. So I'm just a lawyer, but I was able to use the mapper to sort of freehand draw these panels and then turn layers on and off and sort of see the picture of what is going on with the development. So let's see. I can go back to screen sharing and I will pick the what I did. So if everyone can see this, as we remember, there are different backgrounds, right? The base layers that you can look at. So I chose this version rather than an aerial one, just because it was sort of lighter. And then using the draw tool, and I am not able to do it as well as Melissa. I didn't color it in, but I just used green and sort of sitting there with the PDF of the map in one hand and using the tool, I outlined the project area in green. And this is an 880 acre project area. And then using a different color, and again, just sort of freehanding it in purple, I outlined where the solar panel arrays would go. And the first data layer that I turned on is transmission lines, right? Why would they want to site this project out there in the middle of Columbia County in the town of Copiague? Well, you can see from these pink lines, this is where the transmission lines are, right? And there's a substation. So that's what is attractive to the developer here. And then finding a willing landowner, right, to lease from. Now they are moving forward with coming up with a project proposal that they intend to apply and run to the Office of Renewable Energy Siting for approval. So let's see if I can do this in the right order. So then after looking at the transmission lines and understanding that picture, the next thing I looked at was prime soils, right? So prime soils are pretty much equivalent to what they call mineral soil groups 1 through 4. These are what are designated as some of the most valuable soils. And the applicant said in its materials, we're only impacting out of our, 880 acre site and our 220 acres of panel arrays and 250 acres of total area being disturbed, we're only impacting 13 acres of prime soils. And you can see here, right, they've cited these two northernmost parcels up close to the substation on either side of this prime soil area. This parcel seems to be right on top of a lot of prime soil. And then down in these areas, there's a little bit within. So, is that 13 acres? We can sort of vet that. I didn't go so far as to use the measure tool and acres, but we can start to see whether or not, we can, confirm that what the applicant is telling us about how many prime soils are being impacted is actually the case. The next thing I looked at is agricultural districts. So as opposed to soils, agricultural districts are, designated upon nomination by the county to the state. And within those districts, if farming is going on, it gets protections, right? And the land in there gets certain tax benefits as farming, right? So, these are areas designated by the county and the state as valuable agricultural places. So soils is one thing, but we see that this project is located pretty much entirely within an agricultural district. And so, while that may be sort of a lesser issue in terms of impact, then, the next question might be, all right, well, how much of the whole agricultural district is this project going to take up, right? How much of an impact is it going to have on the agricultural economy here as a whole, right? So that's just another consideration from the point of view of agricultural impacts that you can use the tool to look at. Yeah, Manna, I see your hand. It's the only one I can see. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let's see. Will the landowner lose the exemption if it's developed, if this much of it is developed for solar in an agricultural district?
I think at this point, yes, there will be a penalty because it'll no longer constitute agricultural activity unless maybe we can get co-location going on in there. And I know that a lot of movement is happening in this area. Recently, the state issued guidance for assessing solar panel array areas, so that might address the issue. And also right now, for some odd reason, oil and gas is something that is exempt from being impacted by this, and we need to get solar added to that. So if anybody wants to lobby the legislature on that. So I don't know the total exact answer, but I think it could definitely have ramifications with regard to this property and its tax exemption if it gets converted over to solar use as opposed to agricultural use. But then, you know, the property owner is getting the benefit of lease payments, right? That's an economic choice that they make. Oh, I did have this. So one of the next things I took a look at was wetlands, right? So here in these two colors, we have both state jurisdictional wetlands and national wetland inventory wetlands. The distinction is that state wetlands have to be 12.4 acres and above, and they are specifically regulated and have buffer areas. And now we can see a little bit more of the story that's going on, right? As this applicant has been attempting to keep these projects out of the wetlands, that is what pushed them into the prime soils, right? So again, they're trying to like triage here, right? How much can we keep our visual impacts down? How much can we minimize siting on, you know, our prime soils? And also, in order to avoid having to conduct any sort of wetlands mitigation or pay into a mitigation fund, how much can we stay out of the wetlands and out of the wetlands buffer? So you can sort of see the dance that the applicant is doing here. So this was state wetlands, and then I added on the federal wetlands. And then one other thing, sorry, these things are not in the best order here. One other thing I took a look at was flood zones, the 100 and the 500 acre flood zones. So, you know, we have a lot of discussion in the tool about flood zones. It is possible that you can develop solar energy there with specific treatment to keep it out. This is just another example of, you can sort of see, obviously it makes sense that the flood areas are also where the wet areas are. But, you know, again, you can see how the applicant is working to keep out of it, except for over here, they might have to do some treatment to deal with the fact that they might be in a flood prone area. So this is just, you know, and I was making these maps by going to the full screen option that Melissa and Alex just demonstrated, and then doing screenshots on my computer as opposed to using the print function. And then what they did is they went directly into a folder that my computer put them into. But it's just a, you know, just a quick example, as opposed to doing sort of a municipal wide mapping exercise and trying to find potential solar areas. You can also use the tool, and this is just a picture of the aerial with the area and the solar panel array areas over. So you can, you know, you can see here, there's also going to be some forested areas within where the panel arrays are proposed. And, you know, one other thing you could do is we have the forest layers. Look at that. I just, to spare you all looking at a million maps, and then, but this is just an example of what you can do looking at a specific site. And I can't see everybody's faces or hands, so if anybody has any hands up or questions, happy to answer them. Stunned silence.
This is a great way to show how you can use it to actually hold developers accountable, and you see what they're doing and if they're being truthful in their reporting. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Very helpful.
All right, Mana, are you ready to share?
I'm gonna try.
Okay. And we have a long step 6 of the agenda, so hopefully everyone is ready to stick around for a bit longer.
Okay, I go to screen.
Yep. And then make sure the screen you want to share, if you pulled it out of your big browser, then you want to make sure you.
I want to do this one. Okay. Can you guys see that? Or
Yeah,
do I need to share again?
we
I
see
need
your
to share-
worksheet. Is
Oh,
that-
it says you are. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So we made a copy of the worksheet for Rosendale. And the first thing we did was put in the various comprehensive plan, natural resource inventory, open space plans, and CEAs we're still looking for. The general zoning ordinance and this, and thanks to Audrey, the solar zoning ordinance. And then we went to assess existing development patterns, and there are developed areas. We looked at those and we made note: Main Street, Rosendale, Bloomington, Tilson East and West. And then agricultural lands were pretty much along the Roundout Creek and the Wallkill Creek. And then general development patterns. One of the areas we are very interested in looking at is this is the landfill and transfer station. And this came up on the screening. Oh no, the town is currently doing a screening study for this particular property. We also, on opportunity areas for solar development, we came up with fans, the building and the parking lot on Route 32. Across the street a little to the south is Creekside restaurant and a carpet store, and it showed up here on the map. And then two areas that essentially are on brownfield sites that either have been or need to be remediated. This is Rosendale. And then these two areas up in Bloomington are mined areas that are mapped. And then right over here are these two, as I said, formerly contaminated areas, and then the information that went with them when we clicked on them. We still have some areas to fill in, but we were very interested in looking at Iron Mountain, which is a very large mined area, adjacent to the Century House Snyder estate. The cement from Rosendale built the base of the Statue of Liberty and the Brooklyn Bridge and a whole lot of other stuff. And it's not mined, so that's where local knowledge, I mean, it's not mapped as mined, but that's where local knowledge comes in. And clicked on this and, got some data. We looked at the municipal building out right off Lucas Avenue. And we also noted that that is next to a really good hosting, a line that has good hosting capacity. And then on Binneywater Road, there's Iron Mountain, which I mentioned before, and these are the kilns, and we looked at all the different layers for that. There are some very major lines. One goes from Sturgeon Pool. This is the boundary of Rosendale. This is actually town of Esopus. But this is Sturgeon Pool, and this is the Central Hudson facility, and there's a line that goes all the way across to High Falls. As I mentioned, the landfill is one of the areas we're particularly interested in. Here it is in gray. And this is one water body with a path across it. Here you can see it with a path across it. And I believe that's one of the chain of Binneywater Lakes. It's certainly connected to the Binneywater Lakes. Here's that landfill with a mark. And then if we click on that, well, I'm not sure if that, I think that was one that Penny added. There are mined areas, and these are up in mapped mined areas up in Bloomington. One is the Klep Ice Mine and the other is unnamed, and we want to find out more about that. A little bit of data on Iron Mountain and the hosting capacity. We need to clean this up and make it presentable to the Environmental Commission and the town board. But protected agricultural areas, we listed, went through and found those and listed them. And we listed the main agricultural districts, and then flood zones. And let's see, this is dropped down, but I think I can move it back up. There we go. This is, oh, and by the way, these are all screenshots. This is that area just south of the landfill. Here's the landfill. Here's a flood zone around a water body. No flood zones that are going to interfere with landfill development from what we see here. And by the way, this is a south-facing hillside, so it's really ideal. And then this is the all of Rosendale, and we looked at the biodiversity layer, and you can see how much of Rosendale has potential biodiversity that needs to be explored if there is an area proposed to be developed in these green areas. And Rosendale has a lot of biodiversity, a lot of forest land, and the land that is not is either active farmland or potential farmland or already developed. So here are the core forests with the forest edges. And again, if we go back to our landfill, here's the divided water body. This is a forest here, and then the edges miss the landfill. So we would not be taking out any trees or even intruding on a buffer around a forest core. And then let's see, this is, oh, historic, some areas are protected to maintain the integrity of historic recreation or other protected sites. So this is the area around Iron Mountain, and we are interested in talking with Iron Mountain, a private company that is very important. It's an underground record facility, so the upper area is really good potential for developing. But this is the Snyder Estate, this is the Iron Mountain property, and you can see that a lot of it is designated. Whether we have to check our zoning code to see whether or not solar can be developed in that area. And I think I'm going to stop there, but this is still very much a work in progress. This is Iron Mountain with its capacity, and you can see this line is, this color, and then if you check the details, you can get whether or not you have good hosting capacity. So I just wanted to give you, some idea of how we've used the maps to gather information and wherever possible, take a screenshot so it'll be illustrative. And then out of that, we plan to make a PowerPoint for the Environmental Commission and invite the town board and the planning board.
I think you did a great job. Definitely better than my just bullet pointed chicken scratch. Andrew, I see your hand. Oh, you're muted.
You can wrap up. I had a little bit of feedback when we're at a good point.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we have a few more things to next steps and wrap up convo to dive into. But are there any questions on Mana's presentation?
That's what I was
Oh,
thinking.
yes. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So, Mana, I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to say, I think Rosendale is such a great example of why the solution set needs to include other types of energy planning. Like, for instance, micro hydro, wood gasification, compost. Compost heat is a very real thing when we're talking about, thousands of tons a day of food scraps needing to be diverted, anaerobic digesters. So I think that, while Rosendale might feel like a site where when we look at biodiversity, when we look at forest cover, when we look at the natural assets of Rosendale, we don't at face value see a huge amount of opportunities for PV. I think it's also important to understand that from an energy planning viewpoint, we need a good diverse palette of options that can be adapted to different locales, like places as unique, beautiful, and potentially powered by other forms of renewables that make, appropriate design sense for what that community can identify as its assets, stakeholders, directions for economic growth. So I think it's a great case study to take a place as challenging as Rosendale and say, well, this is really not going to be a place where it, like, again, in terms of southern exposed open areas to put a lot of panels, there's not a great deal of that in Rosendale, right? But there are these other assets that I love exploring because I see them more up in Vermont. I see Magic Hat Brewery with anaerobic digesters. I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities for a place like Rosendale that are not necessarily pointing to solar, and the mapping tool once again is super helpful at helping to identify these things. So thank you.
I also want to point out, since you mentioned anaerobic digestion, here in Ulster County, any business or entity that generates more than 2 tons of food waste either has to send it to a farmer if it's usable by humans, send it to essentially a food bank. But if not, compost it either on site or at a processing facility. And over the next 3 years, that'll go from 2 tons to 1 ton to 3/4 to 1/2 a ton, which will include most of the large food waste generators. Hannaford is, for example, and has been throughout the Northeast, doing anaerobic digestion. So it's composting or anaerobic digestion. So some of these things are in place, but people don't know about it. And I wanted to mention it on this call because I'd be glad to share our ordinance, which took 1.5 years to develop because it was a very stakeholder inclusive process. And Penny had her hand up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You actually answered my question. And thank you, Mana, for having shepherded that through the legislature.
Can you share that with us, Mana? Can you
Yes.
send it to us?
When I send the Central Hudson information, I will send our food waste reduction and and diversion. I forget, it has a better title than that, but
Was that tonnage yearly? Was that a yearly tonnage you were talking about?
no, I'm talking about weekly.
Weekly. Oh, wow.
So
naive.
it really is going to capture most of the food waste, because a lot, in addition to those requirements, a lot of residents are already composting. For example, Ellenville Hospital, I didn't realize it. They've been composting for years.
Mohunk.
SUNY New Paltz is sending all of its food waste for composting, and they're using reusable. I don't want to get sidetracked into solid waste. We'll be here another couple hours.
Yeah, we have so many agenda items. Penny, you have a question?
I just wanted to say that this is what Andrew was talking about is a really good reason for making sure that we get a hold of the stats for what Rosendale is using. Because I mean, I'm looking at these solar arrays and thinking, wow, we'll be able to sell it to Marbletown, but I have no idea what I'm talking about. So yeah, then the amount of electricity that we're using would be a really nice figure to have.
We're working on it. All right. So just to kind of wrap up the sharing, we just wanted to recap, what the tool can do, good ways to use it. Alex, if you want to give a little spiel about that quick. I think we kind of went over it all through speaking, but
Yeah, I think those 3 demos were really great examples of different ways to use the tool. And there are sort of different outcomes. We talked, I think, a lot about 2 of the use cases, right? The sort of municipal wide planning use, and then the specific site assessment use. And we saw examples of kind of both of those. And we were chatting yesterday, and Penny used the word exploration, which I think is a great word, the sort of just looking through your community. What are your assets? Where are they located? How do they overlap? How are they related to each other? Just exploring the resources using the tool, as well as some of the other tools that we link to. But what's okay, so we're doing municipal planning, we're doing site analysis. What are the possible outcomes? What's the endpoint for using the tool? And there are a bunch of different ones here again, and we're seeing examples of those. One is just learning, reading the guidance on the left side of the screen, learning about sort of what the issues are, what to be thinking about. Manna and Melissa were both using the worksheet really extensively, which can be great, capturing notes, capturing screenshots and putting them in that, which I hadn't even thought about putting screenshots in the worksheet, but I think that's a great way to capture information. Having a worksheet filled out, or just, taking notes in the worksheet to then bring, to part 4, right? Oh, I see that there's a brownfield site here. I'm just going to make a note of that in my worksheet. And then when I go to part 4, start overlaying other layers on it, see what else is in the area. And then, we see sort of one possible outcome is these static maps, like Audrey created, like Melissa was creating, and you can do a series of those to capture different layers. I think a lot of people, when they first start using a mapping system like this, a geographic information or GIS system, they want to turn everything on, and it gets overwhelming pretty quickly. But having a series of static maps can really help alleviate that. And the other thing, of course, especially as more and more town board and planning board and CAC meetings go to Zoom, is you can do screen sharing, and then you have the interactive map there, and you can walk people through. If you're comfortable using the tool, you can always do a live demo like Melissa did, like I've done, where you're turning on and off layers as you talk through looking at a site or talk through exploring your town. And if the technology's there, and you can also project from a laptop onto a screen, so when we go back in person to these meetings, that's another option. So there are lots of different ways to use the tools, and I'm sort of tickled to see three pretty divergent examples of how you can use it.
Thank you for that. And thanks for designing such an amazing tool that we can present. All right, so next, this kind of segues into next steps. And this was something that Chris Kehoe had brought up at I think third meeting maybe, and we said this is more of a conversation for the end. So we kept it, but how to outreach to landowners and developers. It was mentioned, how should we connect solar developers with shopping malls, for example? Mana mentioned industrial sites. What interest would developers have and why would they listen to us? And so we wanted to know, had anybody tried this and faced challenges, and who would want to speak about this and start this convo?
I can take a shot if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
Great. And I was talking to Mana earlier. I was hoping that by the end of this process, we would have had an amended solar ordinance that we could share with everybody on our sort of a ranked choice type of option, the way we have for cell towers, to try to direct people who are looking to do solar into, more appropriate areas, not just using the solar mapping tool, but really trying to encourage and incentivize people to go to the right areas. But for sure, there are, we all have large facilities, whether they're manufacturing facilities or malls or places that have a lot of impervious parking, or just any parking, that we can encourage them to do canopy. So we've been in touch with a number of developers to try to have them assess their roofs and get them more comfortable with the idea of solar on mall roofs and large manufacturing facilities. There are a few in Cortland that have done that and have had great success with doing community solar on their roofs and actually being able to draw down a significant portion of their energy uses. One example is in the village of Buchanan. So they're in Cortland, but they were approved along the river in Buchanan that was having difficulty in summer to have enough energy to be able to have a third shift. And now that they're able to they have rooftop solar that is a very large facility, they're planning to install battery storage along with that. And that's going to give them a stable source of power that even when there is when there is times of high use and they're asked to reduce use or are told to reduce use, they can keep that third shift going. So I think one of the next steps, or one of the complementary pieces that we were talking about, is we're looking at organic digesters and other things, is to make sure that anytime we're doing solar, we look at battery storage as either part of the project or at least built so that it's ready to install that at some point, because everybody's going to decide it's worthwhile for them to do that. So we're definitely looking at we're going to be doing some work on our town hall and hoping to get some canopy installations in our parking lots, just so we can show our local development group that have been a little hesitant to show that we've done it. Sometimes we tell them you should do this and they say, well, yeah, but you didn't do it. So sometimes as municipalities, we need to be leaders and show that we're putting our residents' money where their mouths are. It's not our money, it's their money. But lots of good work out there to be done, and I think it's incremental. We have to keep telling people why this is important, but business owners are starting to see that this is making sense for them. The certainty that used to be the old Lafarge factory next to Indian Point have really seen that not losing that third shift is critically important for them staying open. So there are more out there, and it was great to hear Ellenville Hospital, was at the forefront doing stuff. I wouldn't have expected they were composting either. So great stuff. Thank you, Mana. Really appreciate this. This process has been fabulous.
Thank you so much for sharing, and definitely keep us updated on your efforts and how it goes.
Will do. And Mana also wanted me to mention, we do intend to try to have a ranked choice or a, in our zoning to have some type of mechanism to encourage solar in areas and discourage solar in other areas. So one simple way that I think we could all do it is, as we look at brownfields, to start defining the term bright field, and encourage that use where there is a brownfield opportunity. That bright fields, solar on a brownfield opportunity is not just a permitted use, but maybe an encouraged use.
Great.
All right, so I think in the interest of time, we did have a follow-up question, but I don't think they were able to be here, Jason. So maybe we will follow up with him via email. But I think we should skip. Is Melissa still on the call? The other Melissa?
I am again on the call because Nana texted me.
Okay,
Hey.
you're up if you want to go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I actually kind of alluded to it earlier, but I'll say a little more. We, Sustainable Hudson Valley, worked with Marbletown a couple years ago, kind of developed a method or ported a method that some folks in Connecticut had developed to look at, energy demand, kind of estimate it for buildings and vehicles, as well as for power generation, and then figure out where are local sites and what are strategies like, community choice aggregation and community solar and so forth, and really make a comprehensive plan for the shift to 100% renewables. And Tom Conrad, who chairs the ECC in Marbletown, just happens to be like a whiz bang modeler. So, we could look at how long it would take, and we don't think that it's going to happen in the residential market completely for, at least 10 and probably more like 20 years to get 100% there. But we've designed with a lot of love a pledge campaign, a 10-step strategy, an approach to encourage households and businesses to become educated so that when the boiler breaks or the car needs to be replaced, you're prepared to choose the renewable replacement. And the pledge says, I pledge to shift as quickly as possible. But we're really building a peer support system. There have been about 50 pledge takers, and we're starting to gather case studies of the households that have made the transition completely. And it's just getting kind of cool. We're kind of past the hesitancy and, going, oh crap, we're doing this. So there are monthly webinars. Tom Conrad serves as the town energy coach. But it's a model that can be ported to other towns. And we would like to see at least one community in each county making that commitment. And we'd love to work with them as a cohort. And I think it would be just ideal to have some communities that have already done this mapping process and have this awareness and these skills to share. So Alan was kind enough to say earlier that we're fun and we're useful. So if you want to explore kind of working with us in the coming year, you can email Everett at sustainhv, like it sounds, .org, and you can look at our website and see what we did with Marbletown in terms of a report and a portal to showcase the process.
Thank you so much,
Great.
Melissa. All right, so now we're
Thanks,
gonna
everybody. Go.
Now we're gonna add a Google form to the chat. We kind of made this post cohort survey for you to take. Consider filling out the form right now, because we know with the holidays that people are gonna lose this in their emails and probably not go back to it. So if you could just fill that out. There is a question on there. If you are a municipality that felt like you got a lot out of this process, Would you consider offering your help to future cohort members if we do this again, which we want to? And so would you be kind of a peer mentor? I think that's what the question is. I would like to be a peer mentor, yes or no. And then you would put your contact info. Otherwise, you can leave it anonymous if you want to leave us some feedback that you don't want to know. You don't want us to know it's from you. But yeah, we have that form. And let's see. And then also there's a comment section there. If there's anyone else in your municipality you think might be interested in taking this whole workshop and using the solar tool, definitely put down their contact info in that form.
And if you don't fill out the form, there will be a lump of coal in your stocking.
Oh, that's funny. And then, yeah, we just said it would be a good idea to add all of our contact info and affiliations to the chat if you guys wanted to do that. And then we'll save that as well. You know, if you have any mapping questions about the tool, you can ask me, you can ask Alex. You know, we're all knowledgeable in different little niche areas, but we're coming together and kind of bringing all of our stuff together in this cohort. So
I want to thank you for saying about Google Maps, because you know we have a few people that are familiar and have access to ArcGIS, and we talked in between. I was thinking of using that, but Google Maps are easy to access, easy to use, and I think that was a real valuable addition.
thank you. Yeah, you can do a lot with creeping around like in Street View and reading addresses and everything. Yeah.
I was just trying to fill out the form and it seems to, for some reason, not allow to click on certain, it was glitching. I don't know if it's on my end or what. Just wanted to mention it.
No, it's happening to me too. I was trying to fill it out and I click and nothing happens.
It's not letting you, yeah.
Do we have it on view only or do we have it on edit? I wonder.
Apologies on that. I will try to troubleshoot it and get back with folks, hopefully in a minute or two.
Yeah, no problem. I was just taking your advice to fill it out well.
We appreciate it.
I didn't want the coal in my stocking.
Does anybody have any closing thoughts or things you want to share about the whole process, these last 5 sessions?
Because I haven't started the worksheet yet. Can we have conversations with you, Melissa and Mana, as we work through it? Maybe even over the next couple months?
Yes, and if we can't answer, we'll go to Audrey or Alex. But you know, having walked the walk and tried it, I can attest that it is a really excellent tool. And it only took, you know, really 3 passes to get familiar enough to feel comfortable. You know, we started at session 3 and then worked on it between 3 and 4, and then we worked on it between 4 and 5. And you see how much we were able to accomplish. And both of us are lay people. I've taken one GIS training many years ago. And I think for Penny, this is the first time she even attempted. And before she knew it, she was zooming in and taking screenshots and putting them in the worksheet. And it's been a wonderful partnership. And, you know, as I said, we're going to actually bring this to the Town Environmental Commission and the various town boards and see if we can get Rosendale really engaged, ready to respond to developers and proactive in planning on their own land, and also reaching out. For example, Iron Mountain is in discussion with them about the taxes, they feel that their taxes are too high. So, if they do a reassessment, they could probably sweeten the pot by saying, 10 years ago, you installed geothermal because you were in Rosendale and we invited you to evaluate it, and you chose to do that, and you saved a lot of money for taking that advice. How about you contribute to our solar goals or our renewable energy goals? And I want to thank Andrew for mentioning low impact hydro, run of the river, whatever low impact forms there are, and mention that Clearwater is doing a collaborative process between the people who want to take out all the dams, all the impoundments, and have free flowing waters versus the low impact hydro developers, and trying to create a guidance document similar to the one that was done on excuse me, wind and solar back in 2013 or so.
And to add, Daniel, to your point, again, this is not over because it's the last meeting, and we encourage everyone to use the shared drive we created, even if you didn't have time to get to the tool, now, if you do it in a few weeks from now, because if we're all putting our stuff in there, we can see which maps you're creating for your town, and then we can learn from each other based on that. And I didn't put my maps in there, but I'm gonna add those to my folder for people to view after. So,
and we can even, if people feel the need, after the holidays are over, we could do one more session just amongst each other, once you have had time to work with it. But this is an ongoing support process. And also we're learning from you, especially from the evaluation forms, how to make this better for the next cohort. And we will let you know, once we have a chance to process what's happened and what resources are available moving forward. But we might ask you all for a letter of reference, because I think it's possible that NYSERDA would find this valuable enough to fund this work. And maybe if we get a few letters of commendation, that would go a long way with them.
I just wanted to thank you, Manna, and thank all the folks from Scenic Hudson. And I look forward to future collaborative work with all of you. And it's been a great opportunity to think about some bigger visions for the area. And I look forward, perhaps with my hat of Permaculture Living Land Trust, talking further about a comprehensive design that's about an array of appropriate renewables. And I see this as a really important beginning, and I really appreciate the work that you put into this. Thank you.
Any other? Chris, Alan, Daniel, Peter, Carol?
I'm listening to this, and it brightens up the future. And meanwhile, I'm wondering how this is all going to work in Gardner, where people have got 100-acre parcels that they now want to put little towns and little developments with stores and houses and mansions. And it's just, I suppose they're going to add some solar to the mix, but what we're looking at is less space for solar, less space for agriculture, and a lot more development. And that's what's in the mix right now. So I don't know how you work with property rights that allow people to do this, and then also try to have sane development like what we're talking about here.
One thing I would suggest is, I'm trying to think, town of Bedford and others have developed ordinances about new development, that it has to meet, for example, maybe building performance standards. And I don't know that anyone has required so-called net zero, where you're generating as much as you're using. But I do think there are ordinances and places in New York that are requiring that, and then then working backwards to building retrofits. There will be a lot of money for low and moderate income households that want to do building retrofits, because we've talked a lot about solar, and the renewable energy generation and storage are critical, but we haven't talked a lot about energy efficiency. I think Andrew's kind of referred to that, but my boiler went out at the beginning of this process. 10 weeks, anyway, a little while ago. And I have been intensely investigating what I'm going to replace it with. But in the meantime, because I did a deep energy retrofit a few years ago, I'm able to heat this house with 2 small space heaters, which I turn off during the day when I go to work and I come back, and it's still comfortable. And then I turn them back on and I get through the night. So, I don't want to sidetrack, but I do think energy efficiency. And if you have a lot of development pressure, I would say now's a good time to research those ordinances. And we can put, another folder for energy efficiency and building ordinances. It doesn't have to be strictly. So if you find good articles or good ordinances, let's find a way to share those.
Carol, can I just chime in on that question? One of my colleagues in land trust work uses this phrase that I mentioned before: hook the engine of development to the cart of conservation. And this is some really important work that was done. This guy, Randall Arendt, this book called Growing Greener, it's exactly about what you're talking about: planning, conservation, and local ordinances. And a lot of the work that the Natural Lands Trust, who my colleague David Harper worked with, as well as with Agrarian Trust, is worth looking further into for what Gardner's situation is. I think it's quite analogous what Chester County and Bucks in southeastern PA has gone through. They've done a decent job mitigating it and straddling the fence, but
We have to get it into our code. I mean, we just have to get it into our code fast. Yeah.
We're at the top of the hour. Daniel, do you want to add something super
Yeah,
quick?
just a suggestion and question. There's something in New York State called the stretch code. Are you familiar with that, Carol and Manna?
Yes, we've been talking about that. Yeah, on the town board level. And of course,
Marble Town's adopted it.
Yeah, there's resistance because it will cost people more money.
Yeah, and the developers don't like it, but the conservationists do. And then question on that we are moving in the direction of getting very involved in retrofitting and sustainable. And if anybody can point me to funding sources to help the lower and moderate income homes, and we have a good number of them, so they can not just do the audit, but actually, spend the $10,000, $20,000 that's needed to retrofit their home.
I just want to interject quickly that I put the survey link in the chat window. Hopefully it's working now.
Great. I have 2 suggestions on that. Cornell Cooperative Extension of Dutchess County has a cadre of people all over the 7-county region that can walk people through what the incentives are and what wise decisions to be making in terms of energy retrofit and beneficial electrification, which is the air or ground source heat pumps and electric vehicles. And my other suggestion is, oh, and Sean Welsh is Ulster County, but Daniel, you're in.
I'm in Ulster.
You're in
Yeah.
Ulster, yes.
Yeah.
But it's Dan Welsh. He's located in Cornell Cooperative Extension of Sullivan County. And if you send me an email, I'm not very good at the chat right now, but if you send me an email, I'll put you in direct contact with him. They are really excellent. They're very knowledgeable and very helpful. And the other thing I want to mention is, I touched on it, but the American Recovery ARPA, the funding that's coming from the federal government to the counties, one whole pool of money, and I can't tell you the amount right now, but it's considerable, will be going directly to supporting and incentivizing energy retrofits for low and moderate income. So I'm on that committee, and I want to just say it's the first time in the 8 years I've been on the legislature where this source of funding, we have legislators and the executive branch working together on those projects rather than the executive branch developing a proposal and bringing it to the legislature. And then there tends to be a tension, but we're working together to do the development, which is how government should work. So I really commend everyone who put that together.
All right, it is 9:05. I just I wouldn't be a good moderator if I didn't time all right. But you know, Alex said the survey works now. We're going to send that up in a follow-up email with the recording for those who missed, or if you want to review, because we went over so many different things today, especially as you try the mapping tool. And yeah, I don't know if there's any closing remarks we want to make. We do appreciate everybody, you know, coming, especially to evening sessions, sometimes going a little bit over, and dealing with us when we're sick. And, you know, it's been a great experience, and we're glad that, you know, you all signed up for it. So that's my ending. Anna, do you want to say anything?
I'm good.
And thank you, Alex and Audrey, a lot for all of your assistance and help, because I don't know what if we would have done this well without you.
I think we thank you. We thank Manna for being, you know, having this be her brainchild and bringing everyone together. It was super great. This was an opportunity, not just for us to try and you know, help you all see what the benefits and the uses of the tool are, but you all, you know, gave us information and feedback so that we can, you know, make the tool even better. So super great. Thank you.
All right, with that, happy holidays, everyone. Have a great new
Happy
year.
holidays.
And we'll
Thank you,
talk
and
to
thank
you
you for
via
all your work.
email. Right.
Thank you for everything.
All right, everybody, have a good one.
Oh,
Thanks,
and
everybody.
save the
Take
chat.
care.
Please save the chat.
Got it.
I am saving the chat, and I will stop and save the recording. Power did not go out.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Night all.
Good night.